If you've been following some of the things we've shared with you in the recent past, you would realize that those with the globalist agenda haven't really given up. They're not happy about what happened to them and to their COVID-19 agenda. Failed, didn't work out. I told you it was a fiasco. And so they're thinking about how to have another lockdown of nations. Now, these next things I'm going to tell you about, I really want you to take them seriously. They would want to have another lockdown of nations. And one of those attempts would be what you heard in that video, a climate lockdown. Climate lockdown? Interesting. So they like to lock down countries for some weird reason. And then, of course, the forced currency crash. They like to crash currencies of as many nations as they can, just so they can reset the economies. And all of this is their attempt to bring in a one-world economy. These are not in pursuit of some kind of help or solution to a problem. They're not trying to help anybody. They're not trying to do some good. Make no mistakes about it. They're psychopaths. So they'd like to force some currency crashes around the world to as many economies as they can. Thirdly, is a form of glorification of transhumanism. We're going to try to make transhumanism more attractive. So there's a move to give us the impression that that's what's needed in the hour. And don't forget what I told you, that the Antichrist will be a transhuman. And it's one reason the Bible calls him the beast. And I also told you not to confuse the term beasts that you find in Revelation chapter 5, 4 and 5. Don't confuse that with this beast you find in chapters 11 and 13. They're not the same. The first one, Zoan, refers to an animal in a general sense, just in a general sense. A living creature. But the other one, Therion. And Therion is a beast with all its brutish nature. Poisonous, dangerous. So, and where does it come? Well, we'll discuss that through some more details. I just want to first quickly give you a lineup of things. So I said the fourth one is this glorification of transhumanism. So they want us to think like we are substandard. And so we require this superhuman renewal with the mix of machine and man. Does that remind you of iron and clay? So we'll talk about that in more details. And then the fifth one is the increased rollout of 5G. You remember they tried to do it in 2020. It somehow failed because we're trying to sneak that on the people. And that's one of the reasons they need a lockdown. I want you to understand, the lockdown is not just because they want to lock down. Lockdown will achieve several things. And one of them is the opportunity to lay the cabling they require. They need less interruptions in the streets. It's part of the opportunity to set up their 5G networks. What most have right now, because when we talk about this, they say, well, but we got 5G already. No, a lot of them don't understand. What they have, the frequency band they have is about 3.5 gigahertz for the 5G. So they say, well, we got 5G and there's no problem. You have juvenile 5G. What I want to do is take it to about 40 gigahertz and eventually to about 60 gigahertz. And that'll destroy people. What you already have is bad, health-wise. Many don't know it. It's affecting their health. Because no one really cared. All they thought about was range and bandwidth. But there's more to it. So if all they wanted was just so we can communicate and have good data transfer and so on, why going up to 40 or 50, 60? Why do you have to do that? That is military weapons grade. That's what that is. When you bring that into the streets, then they can very well have what Mrs. Gates described in 2020 when she said people are going to be falling out in the streets, dying, falling out like dominoes. dying. It wasn't going to be COVID that was to do it. They were sure that after they had laid the 5G, this will happen to people. Except that we leaked out their nefarious agenda, and it failed. So they're looking for another way to get it done and give the impression it's harmless. It's not harmless. It's harmful. And they know it. They know it. So what they should be asked is about the frequency. So don't confuse the 3.5 gigahertz or even 5 gigahertz. Don't confuse that with what they intend. Said it's 40, 50, 60 gigahertz. This is where they want to go. And that is genocide. Genocide. Number 5. Is an international land grab. And this is larceny of the gravest sort. Theft. So this is larceny masquerading as globalization, and it's not. You're watching an attempt at the resurgence of 8th century European feudalism. What we have to ask ourselves is, are the people somehow journeying to serfdom without knowing it in the hands of these plutocrats? Is that what's happening? We have to remind ourselves that some of the most brutal, most wicked dictators, despots of history had their times in Europe. And what does that tell us? If they couldn't resist them then, you should realize that in a way, they somehow believe they will not be resisted. And I told you during the COVID, I said, don't somehow expect that when the people rise up and protest, then these dictators will let go. I said, they won't let go. And the people won't be able to change it. So we have to pray. You saw some of the protests. Did they respond to them? No. They threatened them with the army. So they may not rise against this global tyranny that's threatening them. Maybe you should listen to the peremptory language when they speak, especially officials of the World Health Organization or the World Economic Forum, or even the United Nations, including the language of the Secretary General of the UN. They don't speak like you. They don't speak like you. They speak like despots. Like despots. And that can be well understood because understand the generations. You can tell where they're coming from. Then you realize why nations in Africa or Asia have become victims of their tralatious gunboat diplomacy. But in our prayer, we can get them into where they should be, especially in this day of the church age. The Lord told us to fear them not. We should not be afraid of them. We cannot fear them. We belong in another lineage. We cannot fear them. Check our history. We cannot fear them. I want to read something to you in the Bible. In First Epistle of St. John, chapter 4, from verse 1, I'm going to read to you from the Message translation. My dear friends, don't believe everything you hear. Carefully weigh and examine what people tell you. Not everyone who talks about God comes from God. There are a lot of lying preachers loose in the world. And please, don't think about God's kind of preachers. Don't think about preachers like pastors and bishops and those in the house of God, because you're going to notice something in a moment. There are a lot of lying preachers loose in the world. What are they preaching? Yeah, they're preaching. You heard some in that video I just showed you. In verse 2, it says, here's how you test for the genuine Spirit of God. Everyone who confesses openly his faith in Jesus Christ, the Son of God, who came as an actual flesh and blood person, comes from God and belongs to God. How true. And everyone who refuses to confess faith in Jesus has nothing in common with God. This is the spirit of Antichrist that you heard was coming. Well, here it is, sooner than we thought. I like this, guys. There's Message translators. They make it a little flowery. It says, here it is, sooner than we thought. That's not exactly what I was trying to put it, but Still, it's nice because in the King James Version it says, and even now already is it in the world. So I don't think it's trying to say sooner than we thought. Okay. But let's go on to verse 4. My dear children, you come from God and belong to God. You have already won a big victory over those false teachers. For the Spirit in you is far stronger than anything in the world. Glory be to God. Hallelujah. Whoa, the Spirit in you is far stronger than anything in the world. These people, it's talking about them preachers, all right, who go about without testifying of who Jesus is, the Lordship of Jesus, and Jesus Christ is the Son of God. So he says, these people belong to the Christ-denying world. They talk the world's language, and the world eats it up. They believe them. But we come from God and belong to God. Hallelujah. Anyone who knows God understands us and listens. The person who has nothing to do with God will, of course, not listen to us. This is another test for telling the spirit of truth from the spirit of deception. Wonderful.